Did you guys play the New York Times connections today? Because that was pretty messed up. That was the hardest time I've had with the connections in a long time. Anyway, welcome back to the second channel. Today we've got a whole book of poetry from an author named Aleman. We're obviously not going to go through the whole book. We're just going to go for about 45 minutes and we'll see how much we can get through here. There are some things to note. Hang on one second. Okay, so this book, the cover unfortunately didn't go through in the PDF, which is too bad. But this book is called Neon Lights and Plane Tickets, again by Aleman. You can find this book on Barnes & Noble and Amazon, and I will link the purchasing page in the description. Content warning, we might not get to the poems that contain these content warnings, but just be advised, Ellie wrote, several poems have depictions of violence, gore, and cosmic horror. 2 poems deal with drug use, one of them through the perspective of a drug addict seeking recovery. So there are potential content warnings. Ellie also left a note saying, with this book, I wrote the type of poetry I want to read, but it sometimes appears that poems like these are unpopular within the genre. I know there are others out there who think like me, and I wanted to share it. Awesome. I remember the first piece of advice my first advisor gave me in my MFA program was, how do you write a book? You write whatever it is you want to read. So I think that's great, Ellie. And remember, if I don't like it, that's okay. And that's going to transition us into our my spiel that I do every time. Keep in mind, I'm not a professional reviewer. I'm just some guy on the internet who likes reading and writing. The opinions expressed in this video are only opinions. My interpretation of or reaction to the work will not be the same as everyone else's, for better or for worse. I will look for the good and the bad, but no matter what I say, don't be too hard on yourself. Just keep writing. And for those in the comments, please be respectful. Also, I'm so sorry for any mistakes or mispronunciations of names or words. If I come across a word that I don't want to say for whatever reason, I will replace it with the word blank. So, with all that in mind, I think we can go ahead and jump in. So again, Neon Lights and Plane Tickets is the book title. And here we have the table of contents, which I think looks pretty nice personally. I always appreciate a well-organized table of contents. And one thing to note is that this is a long book, and also I took a brief look. The poems themselves are pretty long in most cases, which is cool. We'll see how they read in just a second. We have a little intro before we get into it. Let this serve as the reminder that whatever the enemy throws at you to destroy you can and will be turned around by God as a blessing. The enemy wanted my mind. I reclaimed it. Cool. I don't have much context for this book. I'm wondering if it's like, if all the poems take place in this fictional sci-fi world, if it's the same world for that matter. And, I don't really know who the I is here, and may very well be our author and maybe Ellie, which is cool. I might have rephrased this first sentence personally, but that's just me. It still gets the point across, so I think it's fine. Let's go into our first poem. This is called District. With still closed eyes, eyelids stuck to my skull, I twist my core and limbs in all possible directions, pretending the jolt and abrupt interruption is all part of my dream sequence. Simultaneously, I felt fine pulling at the blanket I will burrow myself under to shield myself from the noisy and blaring intrusion. It is relentless. We have a dynamic going on by now, an understanding of sorts. It knows all too well. It has to bring out the heavy artillery to get me out of my snoozing temple. I heard ya, I surrender. My body may protest, but my mind knows it's in my best interest to lose this battle. If I intend to continue my jarring habits of sleeping on a mattress under a roof, eating daily and running water, I am up, shut up now. If only it were that easy to get it to obey. Once your body heat is registered inside the shower, with open shower heads will the alarm sequence disengage. An electronic-tinted, pixelated, vocalized humanity. Retorted in all its artificial smugness, I begrudgingly obey, letting the multiple strong jets of water hit me from different angles. Hopefully I get to have 3 hot meals today. My alarm, it would leave the initial impression. that the sunlight would shine your way and warm your skin. The moment you step outside of this constrictive and progressively deteriorating abomination of a standing construction, bet your eyes activated some dissonance in your neural pathways when darkness blended with neon gas fluorescent contamination and sparkling beauty marks shining as above so below greet you instead. Most of us distract servants, do our labor after nightfall, that transition strip between evening and morning sunshine, aptly titled the death shift. Death wishes are not the explanation. There is a pragmatic reason involved, wrapped in the benefits. For one, the air is colder. Imagine baking and sweating under your clothes of heavy-duty thick fabric. Doesn't that sound like a good time? Does it? The streets are emptier, makes the shifts go by quicker, and plenty of the suppliers need stocks updated and fresh for the following business day. I do all sorts of things, following the highest paying gigs. I am not a betting woman. If I were, I would wager you the ones that pay the most are the most unpleasant on the list. Cleanups, oil work, transport, repairs, sewages, just to name a few. Deliveries, too, both legal and illegal. I did clarify just a moment ago, I follow the earnings, not the moral teachings. My eyes see all the occurrences, but request any opinions or retellings, and I suddenly became blind and mute. I decided to take a pedestrian, old-fashioned relic from previous generations, called trucks. Civilization travels on space vehicles in this era, but the transportation vestigial organs still provide helpful applications for us. Along the way to pick up destination, you can entertain yourself, glaring childishly from the window or dashboard, all the excess of darkly colored buildings and pastel-colored lights. Most concrete, however, some insist on dawning facades of thin sheets of metal, aesthetic or poverty. No one can tell. It hasn't rained in weeks, yet the pavement and sidewalks are perpetually wet. Random objects always hanging off the poles and cables. Yes, those are people moving disoriented and spastically like zombies. No need to be wary. They won't devour you on sight. The horse tranquilizers will strip the rationality and corporal control of anyone. Don't ask me for details. I told you I am blind and mute. I get to the appointed location. Doors open. Crates stack up. Carts move around. Scammers get put in place. Things get signed and scanned. Next stop, delivery destination. I remind myself I am also deaf when incessant thuds, bangs, and other plethora of unsettling noises serve as the soundtrack for this road trip. This genre is not to my liking. I turn the radio, full volume, to the most violent, energetic, and loudest black metal on the market, serves its intended purpose of drowning out the unpleasantries. But the official answer is that the guitars, drums, and screeches keep me focused on the roads ahead. I get to the site. Customers unload and inspect crates, quality control claims. They move around on their own. Animalistic grunts escape through holes, scratching in erratic patterns. Frail and bloody phalanges make their way to the exterior through the aforementioned holes. Hoarse voices, poundings of all decibel varieties. Customers give the approval signal. I internally celebrate as my paycheck is signed and placed atop the palm of my hand. We are done here. What was the cargo inside? The noises? I don't know. Ask someone who isn't blind, deaf, and mute. Okay. So, long poem, which is, fine. A lot of people like long poetry. This strikes me sort of as a novel in verse, and I don't know that for sure because, maybe the next poem isn't about this protagonist at all. But that was really how it seemed to me, that this was the opening of, like I said, a novel in verse. The difference, of course, being that a novel in verse is written in a poetic style, whereas a regular novel is just written in prose style, right? I, the only example I can think of is like Paradise Lost, but even that I would sort of hesitate to call a novel in verse. I would probably call that more of like an epic poem. But anyway. It's hard to even know where to begin because we just have a lot going on here. So I think we'll just take it one stanza at a time. Usually we would take it line by line, but this is a long poem, so we'll just take it one stanza at a time and see what stands out. With still closed eyes, eyelids stuck to my skull, I twist my core and limbs in all possible directions, pretending the jolt and abrupt interruption is all part of my dream sequence. Simultaneously, I felt fine pulling at the blanket I will burrow myself under to shield myself from the noisy and blaring intrusion. It is relentless. We have a dynamic going on by now, an understanding of sorts. It knows all too well. It has it has to bring out the heavy artillery to get me out of my snoozing temple. So, I think this opening stanza actually kind of encapsulates sort of my one desire for this poem, which is that I wish we knew more about the speaker. Um, I will say I like what is going on here. I like the description of like this futuristic alarm clock, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But yeah, like I said, I just wish there was more to know about the speaker. With still closed eyes, eyelids stuck to my skull. Eyelids stuck to my skull in particular is an interesting line, but one that prompts a lot of questions, like, because eyelids aren't stuck to one's skull, and so I have to wonder, like, are we being poetic here, or is this speaker like a robot of some sort? Are they an android, right? Like, and, I ask that because I know we're in a sci-fi setting here, right? So I have to wonder, like, is the speaker just waxing poetic, or is this a literal description of their body, right? Um, yeah, I wish I had more context for that, I guess is what I'm saying. And then I twist my core and limbs in all possible directions. Again, that kind of just sounds like waxing poetic, but like my core, that's a word that we would usually assign to a robot, right? Um, or to a machine, I guess, like something with an energy source. I don't know. Um, so yeah, like I won't beat a dead horse here. I just wish we knew more about the speaker, and maybe there's more context that I missed, and we'll pick up on that more as we go on through our second reading here. Um, But yeah, that's kind of my main thing at the moment. So, second stanza reads, I heard ya, I surrender. My body may protest, but my mind knows it's in my best interest to lose this battle if I intend to continue my jarring habits of sleeping on a mattress under a roof, eating daily, and running water. That has a pretty nice flow to it. There's some subtle rhymes in there that work pretty well, like protest and interest. Um, Jarring habits and mattress. They're slant rhymes, of course, but yeah, like, they have a nice sound to them, line by line. Um, and of course, I I don't think I mentioned this yet, but, like, even though we're in a sci-fi setting, it does feel very much like, a description of what we're actually living through, right? It sounds like, just a regular working class person, but in a sci-fi setting. So, if I intend to continue my jarring habits of sleeping on a mattress under a roof, eating daily, and running water. That line did throw me a little bit, like, the way it's worded makes it sound like the speaker will be eating running water, right? I think you need another verb after the and, eating daily and drinking running water, right? Or accessing running water, whatever, what have you. Anyway, I am up, shut up now. If only it were that easy to get it to obey. Once your body heat is registered inside the shower, with open shower heads, with will the alarm sequence disengage? Um, Frankly, I think I would benefit from an alarm like that. An alarm that doesn't stop ringing until I am physically out of bed and in the shower. Like, that would highly motivate me to get up in the morning. At least, you would think maybe I would be more like the speaker, and I would just get used to it, and wouldn't actually be that diligent at all. So anyway, it's relatable even in spite of the sci-fi setting, which is good. But, again, that makes me just want to know more about the speaker, because, like, as much as I relate to the situation, I also want to be able to relate to the person, right? An electronic tinted pixelated vocalized humanity retorted in all its artificial smugness. I begrudgingly obey, letting the multiple strong jets of water hit me from different angles. Hopefully I get to have 3 hot meals today. My alarm. Another thing I wanted to note is that the punctuation is pretty inconsistent. Like, it feels like there should be a period at the end of this sentence. Oh, wait, there's the period. I didn't even notice it. Um, I thought that was just a regular line break. Um, I guess that's fine. That's a pretty jarring decision, though, to put the period just on its own line. Like, I think that's the only instance of something like that in this poem. Yeah, kind of weird, kind of distracting. My alarm, it would leave the initial impression that the sunlight would shine your way and warm your skin the moment you step outside of this constrictive and progressively deteriorating abomination of a standing construction. Mhm. So I think I see what you mean, Ellie, when you say that, uh, poems like these might be unpopular in the genre. Um, I would say most readers don't really opt for literature like this, right? Like, I compared this to a novel in verse. Novels in verse are not very popular, right? Like, I would argue maybe even less popular than the average poetry collection, and poetry collections on their own are already unpopular. And yet, there is an appeal to it, right? It's kind of purple prose, right? But not prose because it's poetry. But it's like, what do you value literature for? If you love literature for the ability to say things in really, you know, beautiful, unique ways, then this would probably be up your alley, right? Like, the moment you step outside of this constrictive and progressively deteriorating abomination of a standing construction, like if you go to literature to find sentences like these, sentences that you would probably never hear in conversation, then yeah, this is for you, right? This is right up your alley. And I can appreciate a uniquely constructed line for sure. Um, that being said, I don't know. I think my tastes have evolved even like in the last 5 or so years. I did used to really enjoy writing like this. And, part of me still does, right? I can appreciate it for its uniqueness, but at the same time, it is kind of taxing on the mind, right? Reading literature like this can really take it out of you. It can be a bit of a mental drain. Again, there is an audience for it. I think there's a balance, right? I do want my poetry to say something in unique ways, but at the same time, I also want it to not be too verbose or too wordy. Like I said, it's a balance, right? And it's a balance that's hard to strike. Um, I think it's okay to have poetry that's kind of inaccessible, right? Poetry that makes you like work to understand it. Honestly, that's it's kind of the best kind of poetry, right? Like the more you put into it, the more you get out of it versus a lot of the insta poetry that's out there these days where you put more into it and it's not really rewarding at all, right? Because everything is just kind of already there plainly. So anyway, this was a huge tangent and I kind of forgot what my point even was. Um, Right, the style. So, Ellie, like I said, I'm sure there are people who are into this. I know there are people who are into this. It's not my thing personally, but like I always say at the beginning of all of these videos, that's just my opinion, right? Like I said, I'm sure there are people who are into this. Um, and I hope that my criticism doesn't sound like too negative here because, like I said, this isn't for me. So just be aware of that as we keep going here. Because, like, it's a novel in verse, and so I understand this sort of desire to describe things so poetically. But, like, the moment you step outside of this constrictive and progressively deteriorating abomination of a standing construction, I don't know. I guess all I can think is, like, nobody really talks like that, you know? And I feel like nobody really thinks like that either. And granted, we're in a future setting here, so maybe people do talk like this in the future. Um, but I don't know. Like, poetry is the place to do this sort of thing, but it still has to appeal to the senses. I feel like appeal to even common sense. I don't know. Like I said, it is a balance, and it's a really hard balance to find. Um, Tell you what, at the end of this video, I will read a poem, something that I read last night, and maybe it can give us more insight into what we're talking about here. Bet your eyes activated some dissonance in your neural pathways when darkness blended with neon gas fluorescent contamination, and sparkling beauty marks shining as above, so below, greet you instead. I do appreciate stanzas like that where we get, some imagery. But again, like it's just in that style that's, not really the style that I would probably write in personally. So yeah, take it all with a grain of salt. I do appreciate the efforts to do imagery though, right? I think imagery is really valuable in poetry and in a novel in verse. Um, it's like with a novel, you have a lot of room, right? As opposed to like a short story or a poem. Uh, in a novel, you have the room to do imagery, right? And so if you're working in a longer poem, you have the room to do that too. Whereas in a shorter poem or in a short story, you might only need to set up the essentials, right? And in a novel, you still even have to be careful because, like, you don't want to go overboard with the imagery. You want to make sure that your reader is hooked, and then you can get to those, like, beautiful imagery type moments, right? Anyway, most of us district servants do our labor after nightfall, that transition strip between evening and morning sunshine, aptly titled the death shift. Death wishes are not the explanation. There is a pragmatic reason involved, wrapped in benefits. For one, the air is colder. Imagine baking and sweating under your clothes of heavy-duty thick fabric. Doesn't sound like a good time, does it? The streets are emptier, makes the shifts go by quicker. So in the same sense that I want to know more about the speaker, I kind of also want to know more about the job, right? I think we get some more detail as we go on here, but I want even more personally. But we'll keep going. And plenty of the suppliers need stocks updated and fresh for the following business day. I do all sorts of things, following the highest paying gigs. I am not a betting woman. If I were, I would wager you. Sorry, if I were, I would wager you, the ones that pay the most, are the most unpleasant on the list. I kind of have a feeling there was supposed to be a comma after you. If I were, I would wager you, period. The ones that pay the most are the most unpleasant on the list. And again, speaking of inconsistent punctuation, I don't think there needs to be a comma after most either. The ones that pay the most are the most unpleasant on the list. And honestly, maybe I would even rephrase that a little bit. Like, the most unpleasant are, I don't know. Maybe it's the on the list that kind of bothers me. Like, I feel like that's implied, right? The ones that pay the most are the most unpleasant. I think you could just end the phrase there. Call that nitpicking, though. Cleanups, oil work, transport, repairs, sewages, just to name a few. Deliveries, too, both legal and illegal. I did clarify just a moment ago, I follow the earnings, not the moral teachings. Yeah, again, like, not to beat a dead horse here, but throughout this all I can keep thinking is like, I just want to know more about the speaker. I want to know more about their thoughts and feelings, their hopes and aspirations, right? And I don't want that delivered to me in like such a heavy-handed way. But I'm getting insight into what their day-to-day looks like. Um, but I want to go deeper with that, right? And like even on maybe a physical level, right? Is there something special about this speaker, even like in the way they look? Like, obviously, I don't want that to be the only thing that the poem is about. That would be a really weak poem, just to, describe the speaker by how unique they look. Um, but yeah, I want more characterization here. And like I said, I understand that this poem is kind of about, how grueling the 9 to 5 is, or how grueling the job market is right now, how we're all basically like in this gig economy at this point, and how much that kind of sucks. I get that, I really do. And yet, I think the personal touch would really add a lot to the poem, because we know, right? We all know how crappy the job market is right now, and how we all kind of are just struggling to get by under capitalism right now. So, what unique perspective does this speaker bring to that idea, right? But with that in mind, we'll keep going. My eyes see all the occurrences, but request any opinions or retellings. Oh, we're supposed to take. Sorry, the punctuation keeps throwing me. I don't think you need a semicolon there. Um, and maybe not a comma there either. But but anyway, this is supposed to go in tandem with the next stanza. So my eyes see all the occurrences, but request any opinions or retellings, and I suddenly became blind and mute. So I think it should be become in the present tense, right? Because request is in the present tense, yeah. So, but request any opinions or retellings, and I suddenly become blind and mute. I decided to take a pedestrian, old-fashioned relic from previous generations called trucks. That's kind of funny. I like the humor there. But also, like, I was very confused by this whole blind, deaf, and mute thing because in the literal sense, that's not true, right? Or is it? Like, is the speaker part robot and do they become deaf, blind, and mute, like, in certain circumstances? Like, in the literal sense? Like, when they do illegal jobs and somebody asks them about those illegal jobs, is that when they go blind, deaf, and mute? I would think that's kind of what we're getting at, and yet I can't quite tell because the purple prose actually kind of makes it hard to understand, right? To find the accessibility here. I recently read a poetry collection that I found a little bit inaccessible. It was called Plain Water. I forget who the author was, which sucks. I'm so bad with author names. I'm sorry. Plain Water. But, you know, even though a lot of the poetry itself was kind of inaccessible to me, um, I, there was, I don't know, what am I even trying to say right now? I guess I could still see the artistry, right? And I can still see the artistry here too. It's funny because, like, I feel like it's almost opposite, where the artistry here is in crafting unique sentences and, like, flowery sentences. Whereas in Plain Water, I think the artistry just came from, like, um, really brief, kind of weird observations. Um, I don't know. You would have to read it for yourself. Yeah, I don't know. Just thinking about all the things I've been reading lately, and I can't help but compare it to what I read now, currently. So, very different schools of thought when it comes to writing poetry that might be hard for the average reader to get a hold of, right? Anyway, civilization travels on space vehicles in this era, but but the transportation vestigial organs still provide helpful applications for us. You know, another thing is if you really like world building, then this would probably be a great book for you, right? Because it does sound like there's a lot of care and a lot of thought put into the world that we're investigating here in this poetry collection. So if you like world building and you like really flowery writing, then it kind of sounds like this would be the book for you, right? And I don't dislike world building. You know, I definitely am intrigued by all these details. But again, I think I just desire more from the character, right? Because as interesting as the world is, I feel like it is ultimately the character that's going to kind of get me into any story, right? And yeah, I've thought that way for a long time. Like even in high school, I remember reading Crime and Punishment, which, you know, obviously a great lauded book, but I just didn't like it because I didn't like Raskolnikov as a character. So yeah, that's kind of always been the main drive for me is the characters. And I think I've even said that on the main channel, right? The story is the characters, right? You don't have a story without characters. Um, and so in my mind, I feel like it's ultimately kind of on the merit of your characters to push the story forward and to make the story interesting, right? Like even, you know, the world and the concept can be super interesting, but if I don't enjoy following the characters, then ultimately the whole thing is going to fall flat for me, right? And I recently did that Critical Drinker video where he said he really hated Us, Jordan Peele's Us, because the concept was just kind of nonsensical to him. But then he also said that he really liked the characters and really felt concerned for them. And I pointed out in the video how disingenuous that seemed, because the characters are the thrust of the whole thing, right? If you liked them and if you felt concerned for them, then it sounds like you enjoyed the story despite any gaps or any nonsensicalness to it, right? Anyway, another tangent, and I apologize for that. We'll keep going here. Along the way to the pickup destination, you can entertain yourself, glaring childishly from the window or dashboard, all the excess of darkly colored buildings and pastel-colored lights. So again, more imagery, which I appreciate for sure. Most concrete, however, some insist on donning facades of thin sheets of metal, aesthetic or poverty. No one can tell. It hasn't rained in weeks, yet the pavement and sidewalks are perpetually wet. That's an interesting detail. I like that one. It hasn't rained in weeks, yet the pavement and sidewalks are perpetually wet. Yeah, I like that. That's intriguing. Random objects always hanging off the poles and cables, yet those are people moving disoriented and spastically like zombies. No need to be wary. Uh, oh, yes, those are people. Sorry, I read that as yet those are people. Okay, that makes more sense. Understood, understood. They won't devour you on sight. The horse tranquilizers will strip the rationality and corporal control of anyone. Don't ask me for details. I told you I am blind and mute. Oh, excuse me, sorry. I get to the appointed location. Sorry, excuse me, folks. Doors open, crates stack up, carts move around, scammers get put in place, things get signed and scanned. Next stop, delivery, destination. I remind myself I am also deaf. When incessant thuds, bangs, and other plethora of unsettling noises serve as the soundtrack for this road trip. This genre is not to my liking. I turn on the radio, full volume, to the most violent, energetic, and loudest black metal on the market. Serves its intended purpose of drowning out the unpleasantries. So yeah, I guess I read that and I think like, okay, so the whole blind, deaf, and mute thing must be metaphorical, right? It must be the speaker saying, like, I turn a blind eye to everything that goes on around here, right? Yeah. Anyway. But the official answer is that the guitars, drums, and screeches keep me focused on the roads ahead. I get to the site, customers unload and inspect crates, quality control claims. They move around on their own. Animalistic grunts escape through holes, scratching in erratic patterns. Frail and bloody phalanges make their way to the exterior through the aforementioned holes. Okay, so it sounds like human trafficking is going on here, right? All the banging going on in the truck, and then this imagery right here. Yeah, it sounds like these people have been captured and trafficked. Um, yeah, I don't really have much to say about that other than it was hard for me to grasp that on the first reading. Yeah. Hoarse voices, poundings of all the decibel varieties, customers give the approval signal. I internally celebrate as my paycheck is signed and placed atop the palm of my hand. We are done here. What was the cargo inside? The noises? I don't know. Ask someone who isn't blind, deaf, and mute. Got it. Okay. Yeah, so if I were to ascribe some meaning to this poem, like I said, it does sound like, all of us here in capitalist America, and funnily enough, it kind of reminds me of Jordan Peele's Us, this idea that you can't get ahead, you can hardly even survive unless you put somebody else down economically, right? So our speaker here, they have to do this horrible thing in order to ensure their own survival, right? And that's just the way things are in this society. And, frankly, that's the way things are in our society, right? You really can't be an ethical worker or an ethical consumer under capitalism. And, there are exceptions, of course. There are some people who have it worked out better than I do, whether through their job or through their purchasing, which is awesome and, good for them. I both envy you and aspire to be like you. Sorry. Excuse me. Ugh, I'm tired. My apologies. But yeah, that's what I gather here. We're kind of inclined to think of the speaker as a bad person, but what other choice do they have, right? Now, with that said, again, all I can think here is I want to know more about the speaker, and we can know a little bit more about the world as we learn more about the speaker, right? How did they grow up and what were their aspirations growing up? And, do they still have any aspirations? Because as it stands, it just sounds like they're a bad person. And, there is such a thing as bad people. Some people are just bad, like, end of discussion, full stop, right? Which is, I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's hard to write a believable character that way because most people think they are justified in whatever it is they do, right? And I have no doubt the speaker of this poem probably feels that way, right? But like, are they numb to all the bad things that they do? It kind of seems that way. And if that's the case, then my question becomes, how did they become so numb, right? I want to know more about them from a backstory perspective at that point. I hope that makes sense. Because yeah, the world is intriguing, and I do want to know a lot more about everything that's going on here, but particularly about the speaker, right? I hope that makes sense. I'll reiterate, like, nobody thinks of themselves as a villain, right? And even when you write villains, I think you should give them at least one redeeming trait. Otherwise, they just won't feel like a real person, right? And there are some people in the real world who are irredeemable, but just because something is true in real life, that doesn't mean it's actually going to feel real in literature, right? I had an advisor who said that to me maybe like, I don't know, in January of this year, I think it was. They said just because something happens in real life doesn't mean it would happen in a book, which sounds counterintuitive, but it's true, right? Your audience only has so much suspension of disbelief. Um, and even though crazy things happen every single day, that doesn't mean that your audience is going to believe that it would happen in a story too, right? I hope that makes sense. Yeah, I think I've made my stance on this poem clear. And like I said, I'm sure there is an audience for this. It probably just isn't me personally. There is still a lot to like here. Just the style is sort of, I don't know. It's just not how I would style my writing personally. And so, like I said, there is a bias there on my part. So be aware of that, Ellie. I would love to hear everyone else's thoughts. We've still got a bit of time, so I think we'll just do a quick read through of the second poem here, and then I'll read, like I said, a poem that I read yesterday. Yeah, this one is called Tariff. Thumps, displaced gastric juices, makeshift slip and slides, bumps, promoting the growth of blunted horns that will gracefully crown my cranium, fingers nursing the affected areas gently, finding a better spots to anchor myself in. Circumstances of a similar vein are results of empty wallets. And impulsive personalities befriended, the tariff to travel is steep. Overpriced for a vessel of its kind, had to be done. A single look at the schedule table. Seconds later, I am close to giving the floor and strangers' baggage a hearty coating of reflux and bile, courtesy of my provisional one-star hotel. The monarch of the reckless, my kingdom is vast, painful, and filled with regrets. Alas, given my status as unidentified cargo, I cannot invite others to join in my misery. My unofficial carriage moves with purpose to a destination that will be a surprise even to me. I am not here to free my body. It doesn't necessitate it. My adulthood is the one caged in. Comfort cannot overtake autonomy. A newborn animal in the wild is born knowing how to walk, running not long after. I just recently learned to crawl. Turtles can navigate all the vast oceans and still remember the one beach they were born in. Their navigational instincts guide them to pinpoint the precise spot. Last week, I got lost trying to find my way to the apothecary a couple of blocks away from my residence. Boiling water is enough cause for amazement at my great achievement. Mocking seal claps, I can prepare a 5-course meal on my own just fine. Filial devotion poisons my ability to see purpose. The virgin skin needs to break, bruise, scrape, for the body to not forget how to heal. Open the skin, let the pathogens in. The flesh has to revise its coagulation techniques. The leukocytes, to function adequately, have to learn to identify harmful from benign, add it to memory, to train the soldiers for the ambush. It doesn't learn this by word of mouth or by listening to theory. It does it by bleeding and battling the maleficent face to face. Quarantine and isolation are the most harmful kinds of protection. No defenses to speak of, no combat experience, easy pickings for the opportunistic. I am not allowed to fall. prompting my hand to take the most menacing blade and plunge it into my skin so I could bleed. This cargo air vessel is what my blood looks like. Getting lost doesn't faze me. Not learning how to find my way back is what I dread most of all. There's some good stuff in there. I liked the turtle bit. I think a lot of good poetry springs forth from learning more about animals. And yeah, I think that makes for a neat comparison, right? This idea that like turtles can always find their way back home, or just, in general, they can find their way through, wherever they've been before. I think that would make for, yeah, that makes for a good metaphor for, us always looking for our way back home, or looking to find a place where we belong, etc., etc. So yeah, I do like that. And yeah, if it were me, I would probably distill the poem down to just those elements. But obviously you're going for your own style here, Ellie, and my style, my take would be very different, of course. So, yeah, it was a good read through there. This is a book called Reader I that I'm holding in my hands right now. Reader, comma, I, the letter I, by Corey Van Landingham. It's a really good poetry collection. I've read through it twice now, and it was even better on the second read through. Um, I actually kind of want to read two poems in here, so you'll see this is not plain water, which I was talking about earlier, that I found really inaccessible. This book, Reader I, does feel inaccessible on some levels, but having read through it twice, I started to get it. Um, and even on the first reading, there were a lot of elements that were still accessible. So this first poem it's in a prose poem style, but there's a subtle rhyme scheme throughout that you might be able to pick up on. It's called Reader I, the poem. A lot of the poems in here are called Reader I. That's kind of the gimmick of the whole thing. But anyway, this poem reads, Reader I was, according to Virgil, always a fickle, unstable thing, woman, with, merger of wife and man, to indicate not girl, not yet claimed, not yet weeping, and aren't they often weeping? The mother, tearing her hair out, running toward the battle lines, filling heaven with her womanly wailing. Dido watching those pale, bulging sails leave Carthage. Creusa, first wife, grabbing at Aeneas's ankles as he flees his son. His house, he relents, allows her to join at a good interval behind, and get this, he doesn't look back. Only once he's skirted Troy, left behind the equestrian pyre, the serpents swallowing boys whole, once he's arrived at the mountain gates. Only then does Aeneas turn. Alas, he goes. He didn't think to look for her. Sure, he grieves, returns to the scalding city before finding her ghost, but never did he turn. This is the forest primeval, the left-behind wives and the wailing, those empires built on our shades, dactyls upon dactyls of bridal beds aflame, sad wraiths, lustrous oceans of tears, as if woman were a climate, a misdirection of wind, dock unmoored, alas. And yes, Aeneas too weeps in the underworld, Dido wandering the fields of mourning, and he wants to know if he made her do it, bring her body down on top of his sword. Was I the cause, he asks? He asks her that, this fickle thing. But she's so sturdy here. Look at her. She is granite, she is dim moon, she is dark grove, is sea unchartable. She will not return his gaze. So, yeah, as I read that, it probably sounded really inaccessible, but like looking at it on the page, it really comes together. So, and I bring this up because, again, like this seems like the kind of thing your average reader wouldn't like, maybe unless they were into poetry, right? But even though it seems kind of hard to grasp and kind of almost unlikable at first, I really, really loved it, right? And the more I read it, the more I like it even more, right? I do want to read one more from this collection because it has those Reader I poems that look like prose poems, but then it's also got more like free verse, typical style stuff. So this next one is called Her Thoughts on the Hereafter. Thynis, Egypt. I talked too much. It was often remarked, Amunet, you have too many words. True, I would often point out the scorpion ascending the date palm, the man with the face of a donkey. True, I doled out jokes for the servants as they rubbed almond oil into my scalp. If I stayed outside too long, talking with his tutor, letting my dog run around me, he would pinch my arm and say, Amunet, do you wish to appear the wife of a swineherd? For refuge, my husband hunted ostrich, gone in the desert long days. He came back with tales of wild cattle, lions that circled his tent at night. He woke to their cratered paw prints, one less horse, hence the hound. Menhet, he named her after the slaughterer, but she refused to stalk the wild cattle, recoiled from the ostrich's sharp beak. She would whine and whine and whine. Like you, he said, so like godlike, my new friend. While he was away, we would walk the gardens, Menhet and I, accompanied some mornings by the tutor, who lectured on history and botany, pointing out the salt cedar, acacia, the pink flowering willows. He told me how Horaha was entombed with women, dwarves, even dogs, that they fed his servants poison to assist the pharaoh after. Artists visited our palace to engrave my husband's likeness. They'd position us closer, closer on the siltstone for eternity. Not one image of me alone. I was named anyway after the invisible one, silent-winged, asp-headed. How often he would repeat my name, as if to call me back to it, to crawl inside that quiet. Amunet, Amunet. And I feared it, the soul, a living thing, that it could so quickly flee me, then pour back in. What if it too didn't want me? What if I went flapping along without it, into that next life? We, like Egypt, would last forever, the tutor told me. I see that he was mostly right. I've seen a whole people wiped out by a great wave 1,000 years after my death. A king in France takes a pinch of me, 1524, each morning with rhubarb, so that his enemies will not capture him. I found nothing bad about you, one husband penned into his wife's coffin. My mother-in-law, blind for 7 years, told me, day of our wedding, Amunet, you are no great beauty. I was lucky, I had been told. The wives of pharaohs have it worse. They said my soul would follow me here, but I'm somehow smaller, my heart lighter than an ostrich feather. My ankles are so thin. Centuries of silence, my husband beside me in this clay room. They said we'd come back to this world with all our treasures. But where's my little dog? So, another lengthy poem there. At least it seems lengthy. And in some ways, that also feels kind of inaccessible. That one is definitely, I think, easier to understand than the first one that I read. But still, there are some lines in there that are like, what? Until you kind of, sit down and really read them or reread them. So, I don't know. I hope this was helpful. Ellie, I would suggest you check out this book, Reader Eye. And frankly, I would suggest everyone check it out. I really liked it a lot. It was a really good collection, Reader Eye by Corey Van Landingham. Before we wrap up here, there was one more thing I wanted to mention. I took a look at the book on Barnes & Noble and on Amazon, and I don't know this for sure, but the cover did look kind of AI generated. It was a picture of just a girl with her back to the viewer. You have this sci-fi poetry collection, right? I think maybe there could be a more creative cover that would be possible for this collection, right? And, I can understand if it is AI, I understand that maybe you don't have, the resources or the money to hire an artist. I understand. Still, even if that's the case, I think you could just get on Photoshop and make something really serviceable without having to use AI. And granted, I don't know for sure that it is an AI cover. I'm sorry if it's not. But if it's not, and you did hire an artist, I would maybe reach out to them again and, maybe spitball some more even creative, captivating covers. Because, we always say don't judge a book by its cover, but everyone does, right? The cover is really important when it comes to book sales, right? And so if it is AI generated, I think you might want to amend that, because I know, at least from what I've seen, most readers are going to be turned off by an AI cover. So yeah, just be aware of that. But anyway, Ellie, thank you for submitting this. I hope you continue writing. That's my hope for everyone who submits, and just for everyone in general. I hope you continue writing. You've got something special here. It seems to me like you have a very creative mind, and so I hope you just continue with it, right? But anyway, we'll leave it there, viewer. I will be interested to hear your thoughts, as always, and thank you so much for watching. Ellie, thank you again for submitting, and ultimately, keep in mind, this is a rough draft.